It was a hazy winter morning. On the outskirts of Lahore stood an old house whose weather-beaten doors and walls had endured countless rains, scorching afternoons and bitter colds. In its courtyard rose an ancient mango tree, its gnarled branches stripped bare by autumn's chill. Directly beneath it lay a tattered charpai, upon which retired headmaster Lukman Sahib sat wrapped in an old shawl. A skullcap rested on his head. Deep wrinkles carved his face, and his eyes held a moisture that spoke of years of unspoken sorrow. He must have been about 60, no longer robust in body, yet a flicker of warmth still glowed in his heart. Removed from the city's bustle, his home felt especially secluded. After a handful of neighboring houses, fields began, and a narrow footpath wound its way all the way to the distant road. Only two souls lived in that quiet dwelling: Lukman himself and his daughter-in-law, Fariha. His son Riaz worked as an accountant at a private firm and, under the guise of field visits, often stayed far from home. It seemed as though he was in no hurry to return, perhaps to avert his gaze from old wounds, or perhaps fate compelled him to remain distant from the heavy air of that house. Whatever the reason, the effect was that the elderly father bore the full burden of caring for Fariha. That burden deepened when Fariha became paralyzed from the waist down in a tragic accident. The doctors delivered the news like a thunderbolt. "Your spine has been severely damaged. Full recovery seems unlikely." Fariha was only 22, still dreaming of a life full of color. She had been married just 2 years, and her bright spirit had once illuminated the entire household. But now everything had changed. A once vivacious, light-hearted girl was confined to a wheelchair. At first, Riaz mustered courage. He took leave from work, met with the doctors, managed her medications. Yet as weeks stretched into months, his enthusiasm waned. He was used to an orderly life. Mornings at the office, evenings with friends, occasional weekend trips. That rhythm abruptly ended. Family traditions often call on daughters-in-law to serve their in-laws, but here it was reversed. The aging father-in-law was utterly devoted to his daughter-in-law's care while his son remained absent. One dawn, as the first call to prayer echoed across the courtyard, Lukman rose from beneath his quilt and performed ablutions in the icy water. Wearing a simple prayer cap, he knelt on a straw mat and offered his prayers. As he concluded, a faint cough drifted in from Fariha's room. Dropping his hands from supplication, he hurried inside. The room was dark. He quietly lit the lamp and saw her lips pale, her throat parched. Without hesitation, he filled a glass from the jug at her bedside and brought it to her. She drank and in a soft voice said, "Thank you, Abuji." In that moment, Lukman felt a surge of resolve. He would sacrifice his life for this girl's peace. Yet alongside that fierce devotion came a hollow ache. The delicate boundaries of their bond trembled in his heart. She was his daughter-in-law. How could his feelings cross that line? But emotions ask no permission. They slip silently into the soul until naming them seems impossible. Fariha carried herself with quiet dignity. Though young, pain had aged her spirit beyond her years. She sensed a new restlessness in Abuji's demeanor, but interpreted it as simple concern, a father figure overwhelmed by worry. Yet the truth was that his feelings had grown beyond filial duty. One day, after a sudden downpour, Lukman wheeled Fariha outside and watched her shawl slip to the wet ground. Bending down, he shook the water out in one swift motion, and, his voice gentle, said, "Looks like another storm's coming. Wouldn't want you to catch cold, my dear." He draped the shawl over her shoulders. When she looked up and thanked him with her eyes, he felt a tremor within. This gratitude was the silent flow of something far deeper connecting them. That night, as the household slept, Fariha awoke in excruciating pain. Half asleep, she called out for Lukman. He had been restless for days, haunted by an unnamed anxiety. Instantly awake, he rushed to her side. She lay sweating, teeth clenched, moaning in agony. He gave her the available painkillers, then massaged her swollen back with anti-inflammatory gel. Gradually, her suffering eased, and her eyelids grew heavy. As she drifted off, she whispered, "Abuji, you are so good." With those words, she fell asleep, yet in Lukman's heart, her simple thank you unleashed a whirlwind of bitter-sweet emotion. He sank into a chair, torn between joy and guilt. The next morning, the house lay silent. Outside, neighbors were on their way for breakfast. Milkmen called out their arrivals. Lukman thought, "I should make something special for Fariha today." Though not a seasoned cook, he knew how to prepare a comforting breakfast. He made creamy porridge, brewed ginger tea, and fried an egg. Carrying the tray quietly to her room, he said, "If you're awake, dear, breakfast is ready." Perhaps hunger brought a small smile to her face as she thanked him and began to eat. Sitting beside her, he asked with genuine warmth, "Was your pain worse last night?" She smiled, replying, "I feel better now, though sometimes it feels like life has stopped right here." Her words struck him like a vice. So young, yet enduring so much. How resilient her spirit was. From that moment, he vowed to bring joy back into her life by any means. A few days later, on a cool, overcast evening, Lukman wheeled Faria into the courtyard beneath the mango tree, where a plank had been fixed to a branch as a makeshift bench. She tilted her head skyward and said, "Looks like rain is coming." He smiled. "Yes, August rains are common here." Sitting nearby on a chair, he glanced at some potted plants once tended by his late wife. Time had withered them, though a few new shoots remained. Softly, he asked, "Do you like flowers?" In a quiet voice, she replied, "Yes. When I was well, I used to arrange bouquets. I even planted henna in our courtyard." Her sadness cut him to the core. That very night, he decided he would buy seeds and fertilizer the next morning so that Fariha might find solace in gardening. True to his word, he set out early the following day, purchased flower cuttings, compost, and sought advice from a gardener. Back home, he prepared a small flower bed, tilled the soil, and carefully planted the seedlings. In the afternoon, he wheeled Faria out to see her new garden. Her eyes lit up. "Wow, Abuji, did you do all this so quickly?" It became their daily routine. Each evening, they sat among the plants. Faria gently removed withered leaves while Lukman sprinkled water. They talked, sometimes laughed, sometimes fell silent. And every day, an unfamiliar warmth grew between them. Soon, they received word that Riaz would return in a week. When he arrived, he found the courtyard transformed, vibrant blooms, and, most strikingly, Faria's radiant smile. Surprised, he asked, "How did all this happen?" Lukman answered simply, "I arranged a little diversion for Fariha." Riaz praised the effort, though his tone was oddly cool. Over dinner, he sensed an unspoken understanding between his father and wife. Not declarations of love, but a bond felt more than spoken. Abruptly, he said, "I have to leave for Karachi tomorrow, an emergency meeting." Faria's eyes filled with hurt. "You've only just come? Can't you stay 2 more days?" He snapped. "Work comes first. Abuji is here." He left the table. Faria's sorrow deepened. Lukman comforted her. "It's okay, your treatment continues. God will make it better." But inside, he burned with anger at Riaz's neglect. Late that night, Faria awoke again in pain. This time, Riaz was home, yet his voice sounded distant. "Take your medicine. I have to leave early." Then he slept on. A cold sigh escaped her lips as she looked at the door. Hearing a soft knock, she brightened to see Lukman enter with fresh water and her new prescription. He gently massaged her back with warm oil. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she contained them. Through her pain, she whispered, "It troubles you so late, Abuji." He drew in a steady breath. "Don't ever think of yourself as a burden. I am here." Those words carried a tenderness that confirmed she had become a new light in his life. The bond that society called father and daughter-in-law had taken on a deeper, unnamed quality. When Riaz departed for Karachi the next day, the house grew quiet again. But Fariha's world was no longer empty. She knew Abuji would always be there. Gathering courage, she resolved to do things for herself. She tied a small bag to her wheelchair to carry laundry or utensils. One evening, Lukman saw it and gently chided, "You don't need that. I'll handle it." She smiled softly. "Abuji, you work day and night for me. Please let me share the load." At her words, Lukman felt, perhaps for the first time since his wife's death, truly cherished. Tears glistened in his eyes, yet he looked away. A few days later, a physiotherapist named Master Shakil began visiting. He worked at a government hospital and treated patients in their homes for extra income. He realigned Faria's legs, massaged her limbs, and guided her through special exercises. Throughout it all, Lukman never left her side. He heated water, brought towels, assisted with the massage. Once or twice, Shakil teased, Abuji, you're practically an expert now, but Lukman didn't mind. Gradually, Fariha's condition improved, an extraordinary testament to her courage. One day, Shakil arrived with a broad smile. Today, your knee bent on its own. That's a very good sign. Tears of joy welled in Fariha's eyes. Lukman praised Allah, squeezed Fariha's hand, and said, just wait, you'll be walking on your own 2 feet one day. Whispers began to swirl through the neighborhood. People whispered that the old father-in-law had his daughter-in-law under his thumb, that something strange must be happening in a house so quiet and secluded. A few sympathized, murmuring, poor disabled girl. What harm is there in a father's kindness? Don't read too much into it. Yet rumors rarely listen to reason. One afternoon, Aunt Nazreen arrived on tiptoe carrying a plate of lentils. Courtesy and curiosity compelled her to settle in the courtyard and sip tea while her eyes roamed over the house. As she left, she patted Lukman's shoulder and said, May God grant you the best of fortunes, Beta. This is indeed a great trial. After she departed, Lukman exhaled slowly. He feared that prying, suspicious minds might taint this pure bond. He prayed to God, O Lord, guide me. My intentions for my daughter-in-law are sincere. If my heart harbors any other feeling, forgive me and show me the right path. That night, the power went out and clay lamps glowed in the courtyard. The low light lent the air a hushed, almost magical stillness. Fariha said, Abuji, no matter how dim the light, it still cuts through the darkness. A person's hope is much the same, a faint flame yet enough to pierce despair. In a voice heavy with emotion, Lukman replied, Your life deserves the light of hope, and I will do everything I can to shield you from the darkness of discouragement. He paused, startled by his own words. Who was he to speak such grand things? Perhaps it was a voice rising from his soul. The next day, Riaz returned unexpectedly at dusk. When he opened the door, he found the house arranged in an unfamiliar calm. Fariha sat in her wheelchair while Lukman gently dried her hair with a towel. Riaz's eyes narrowed. What's going on here? He demanded sharply. Startled, Lukman pulled back. Beta, I was just drying her hair. It gets cold. Riaz's stiffness melted into a mother-like admonishment. Very well. He then lit a cigarette and paced the courtyard, grappling with anger or wounded pride. He could not tell which. The atmosphere struck him as odd. Could his father's feelings have crossed an unseen line? That suspicion pricked at him all night. Before dawn, he woke Lukman and said, Abu, I think we should move Fariha closer to the hospital, hire a nurse or two. You shouldn't have to bear this alone. Harshness tinged his words as if he were leveling an accusation. Lukman's heart sank. In a gentle voice, he tried to reason, Beta, being at home is better for her mind, and I'm right here. But Riaz, unsettled, replied, We'll see, I haven't decided yet. A few days later, Riaz did indeed hire a nurse. Sadef, a young, brisk woman. She immediately set the household to her own exacting routine. Medicines on schedule, precise massage techniques, the bed always aligned at a particular angle. At first, Lukman felt relief that help had arrived, but soon he felt an emptiness. The smile that once bloomed on Fariha's lips at his small jokes withered in Sadef's clinical presence. The atmosphere turned cold and antiseptic. Then one day, with a tight smile, Sadef whispered to Fariha, Abuji pops in every 2 hours, as if he can't bear to leave you alone. In a soft voice, Fariha replied, He cares a great deal. Sadef shot her a meaningful glance and scowled. Yes, too much, perhaps. Those words stung Fariha with an unfamiliar shame, as if someone doubted the sincerity of her care. Meanwhile, the neighborhood gossip mill churned. Why is that old father-in-law so obsessed with nursing his young daughter-in-law? What could his motive be? The son's never home, just the old man and his bride. Filthy minds spun filthy tales. One day, Riaz stormed into Nazreen's house straight from the office, heard the whispers, and boiled with rage. He returned home and unleashed a torrent at his father. Aren't you ashamed? Do you know what people are saying? What kind of behavior is this with your daughter-in-law? Lukman's heart trembled. Beta, I have never done anything improper. Riaz let out a bitter laugh. Improper? The line was crossed long ago, only confession remains. That barb poisoned the air. Sadf, caught in the uproar, resigned, saying, I don't want to be part of any scandal. Fariha fell silent, overwhelmed by shame. She dared not meet Lukman's eyes, though she knew he had always cared for her. Saddened, he began spending long hours in the mosque, sometimes counting prayer beads, sometimes silently praying, "O Allah, I only tried to care for a sick girl. If my heart was impure, guide me straight and do not disgrace me." One stormy night, thunder rattled the sky and flashes of lightning lit the walls in pale fire. Lukman stood in the courtyard watching when he saw Faria by the window, wheelchair and all, gazing upward into the darkness. Tears streamed down her face. Alarmed, he hurried in and asked, "What is it, Beta?" In a trembling voice, she said, I feel like a burden. To Riaz, to you. His heart clenched. He wiped her tears and said softly, You are no burden. You are the center of my life. At that moment, he felt as though a secret held close for years had been revealed. Yet Fariha, eyes misty, asked, "Then what name do we give this relationship?" Silence fell. In the distance, the dawn call to prayer arose. Bowing his head, Lukman whispered, "Intent matters more than labels. I loved you as a daughter, yet in my heart something else stirs, and only God holds me to account." After that confession, the household could no longer contain its secret. The next morning, Riaz announced his decision. "I'm admitting Faria to the hospital. There are nurses and doctors there. You will have nothing to worry about." Faria said nothing. Perhaps she too feared the cruel barbs of society. When the ambulance arrived, she looked at Lukman with tear-filled eyes. "Abuji, please come visit me. I'll be all alone." The hospital's white beds, the sharp scent of antiseptic, the narrow, dim corridors, everything made Faria feel more unwell. Every evening, Lukman brought flowers or fruit, sat by her bedside, and recited verses from the Quran. One day, Riaz caught him there. In an angry voice, he scolded, "The doctor says the patient is becoming too emotional. Please keep your distance." Lukman said nothing, but bowed his head, comforting himself that perhaps Riaz was right. But time is the greatest teacher. Weeks passed, and Fariha's hard work began to pay off. She felt the faint stirrings of movement in her legs. The doctors introduced a new physiotherapy plan. Even Riaz softened somewhat. One night on the hospital roof, he offered his father a cigarette. Lukman refused, simply saying, "Beta, I never took what was yours. My only intention was to be a support for a sick girl." Riaz sighed. "I know, Abu, but people whisper poison. I have to hear it." More time passed. Finally, the doctors declared Faria ready to walk with a walker. When she took her first step, she trembled, but she did it. Lukman, standing at a distance, wiped away tears. Riaz, too, was there. He embraced his wife. Tears brimmed in Fariha's eyes as she glanced at Lukman and uttered, "This miracle is the result of your steadfastness." Returning home, neighborhood children clapped in celebration. Neighbors offered congratulations. Hearts reopened. Time turned a new page, and the atmosphere of the house transformed. Even Aunt Nazreen came once more to shake Lukman's hand and say, "Brother, Allah has honored your patience." He nodded, his eyes bright with gratitude. Life's wheel began to turn again. Faria now tried to walk a little each day, moving from her room to the courtyard with her walker. Riaz's job improved too. One day he sat beside his father and said, "Abu, I've got a good offer from Dubai. Should I go? I can work hard for a while and clear our debts." Lukman placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go, Beta. I will manage things here." After Riaz left, a brief sadness descended, but it did not last long. Faria spent her days exercising, watering the flower beds in the courtyard each evening, and at night either reciting the Quran or preparing simple meals for them both. Lukman thanked Allah, squeezed Fariha's hand, and said, "You'll see. One day you'll be walking on your own." Soon the neighborhood was alive with whispers. Some muttered that the old father-in-law had his daughter-in-law firmly in his grasp, living alone as they were, and wondered what might be happening behind those closed doors. A few, pitying Fariha's disability, scolded the gossipers. What harm is there in a father's compassion? Don't read sinister motives into it. But rumors seldom heed reason. One afternoon, Aunt Nazreen popped in unannounced, carrying a plate of lentils. Politeness and curiosity drew her to sit in the courtyard sipping tea as her eyes roamed over the house. On her way out, she squeezed Lukman's arm and said earnestly, "May God grant you ease, Beta. This truly is a great trial." After she left, Lukman exhaled deeply, fearful that suspicious eyes might taint the purity of his care. He prayed inwardly, "O Lord, guide me. My intentions toward my daughter-in-law are sincere, but if my heart harbors any forbidden feeling, forgive me and show me the right path." That night, the power went out and clay lamps cast a flickering glow across the courtyard, infusing the air with the hushed, almost magical stillness. Fariha said softly, "Abuji, even the faintest light cuts through darkness. A person's hope is just such a gentle flame." Laden with emotion, Lukman replied, "Your life deserves light, and I will do everything in my power to shield you from despair's shadows." He caught himself, startled by the magnitude of his own words. Who was he to speak so grandly? Perhaps it was the voice of his soul rising up. A little while later, the postman delivered a registered parcel. Inside were 2 plane tickets and a letter in Riyas's handwriting. "Abuji, I've arranged for you and Fariha to perform Umrah. I'll meet you at Jeddah Airport. You taught me the meaning of life. Now go thank Allah at his house. Afterwards, I'll spend a few days with you both in Dubai." When Fariha heard the news, vitality surged back into her limbs. Excitedly, she began packing her small suitcase. Word spread through the lanes, and Aunt Nazreen hurried over again, this time bearing pure kindness. "Beta, take these cotton sheets for Makkah. May Allah bless your journey." Exactly 2 weeks later, they found themselves aboard a plane. Fariha could scarcely believe she would ever fly again, yet here she was, granted a second chance at life. At Jeddah Airport, Riaz greeted them warmly. After a brief respite at their hotel, they made their way to the Grand Mosque. Clad in white, their hearts dusted by long months of hardship, they entered Allah's sacred precincts. Fariha performed her first tawaf seated in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mustering all her strength next, she gripped her walker and took a few tentative steps, supported firmly on either side by Lukman and Riaz. With trembling lips, she whispered, "Labbaik Allahumma labbaik." In that moment, there were no complaints, no doubts, no idle rumors, just 3 hearts bowed in humble gratitude before divine mercy. She remembered how not long ago she could not rise from her bed, and today she stood in the holiest of places. In silence, she prayed, "O Allah, keep my Abuji safe. He gave me strength to live. Grant my husband courage. He has come to understand. Enlighten my heart with such light that I shall never despair again." After Umrah, they traveled on to Dubai, gazing out from Riyaz's apartment balcony at the city's glittering lights. Fariha marveled at how vast the world had become and how small her own life had once felt, confined to a bed and a single home. Smiling, Lukman said, "You see, Allah has granted you a new life." He fell silent for a moment, as if recalling something. Fariha peered into his eyes and saw there a sea of unspoken gratitude and feeling. A few weeks later, they returned to Lahore. The house had been spruced up by Riyaz's careful repairs. Rose bushes bloomed, new buds sparkled on the mango tree. Fariha now used her walker only occasionally, more often managing a few small steps on her own. If she tired, she simply rested on a chair while Lukman stayed close, offering encouragement with his silent gaze. One day, she teased him with a bright smile. "Now that I've recovered, are you finally free of all those chores of caring for a sick daughter-in-law?" Lukman chuckled softly and replied, "May you always be victorious. That is all the reward a servant could ask for." A gentle smile lit Fariha's lips too. From that day on, no veil of words lay between them. What existed between them now was a bond deeper than duty, secured by mutual respect. Even the neighbors fell silent, realizing it was pointless to doubt the old man's intentions. They understood that a rare relationship had blossomed here, founded not on selfish love but on selfless service, within which a pure affection had naturally taken root. Now, at twilight, the courtyard's roses sway in the soft glow of the evening light. Faria slowly walks to the bench beneath the mango tree, and Lukman sits nearby, prayer beads slipping through his fingers. Occasionally their eyes meet, filled with quiet gratitude and peace, proof that love is no sin when the heart's intentions are pure. Some time passed, and Riaz began visiting more often, taking leave now and then to spend time with his wife. His outlook had changed. Yes, he felt some remorse for doubting his father, but one day in private he said, "Abu, whatever I said or thought, please forgive me. I was confused by circumstances." Lukman pulled him into a warm embrace. "Beta, I cannot live with a taint in my heart. Let it all be forgotten." Thus life turned another page. Faria regained enough strength to walk to the neighborhood shop on her own. A few kind women from next door came by sometimes to offer sympathy, and saw with joy how far she had come. Faria would tell them earnestly, "It was my father-in-law who taught me to walk again. I will always be grateful." As for Lukman, the occasional twinge in his chest reminded him, "I am growing old, must take care of myself too." Yet a lasting serenity rested on his face, proof that he had finally found purpose in his twilight years. Not long after, there was another joyful event, Aunt Nazrine's daughter's wedding. She insisted that both Faria and Lukman attend, so one evening they set out together. Amidst the glittering lights, the blare of music, the hushed gossip of grandmothers, and the feast laid out before them, Faria, steady on her walker, took it all in. Neighbors greeted her warmly, praising how well she looked. "May Allah keep you happy." She felt as though color had returned to her life's canvas after years of gray. On the drive home, she turned to Lukman with heartfelt yearning. "Abu Ji, I want to visit my parents now. My mother and father must long to see me." He agreed at once, and the next week he took her to her childhood home, where her elderly but spirited parents burst into tears at seeing her walk. Her father clasped Lukman's hand and said, "Brother, you have given our daughter a second life." Overcome, Lukman could barely hold back his own tears. At her farewell, Faria's mother prayed over her and said, "Beta, in your young life you've endured so much. Allah has given you great strength." That night, as they drove back, Faria glanced in the rearview mirror. Though shadows lingered beneath her eyes, she saw a spark of light in her own gaze. She offered extra prayers of thanks, wept in gratitude, and felt a new resolve for her future. Never again to lose hope, regardless of any lingering pain or dependence on wheels. Months passed, and when Riaz visited again, he was truly transformed. Kind, attentive to his wife in ways she had not experienced even in early marriage. One day he teased his father, "Abu Ji, it seems you're the king of this house now?" Lukman laughed. "Beta, this home belongs to all of us. Just remember I'm old, and if my chest aches, I may grumble a bit." Riaz grinned. "Well, at least your grumbles are welcome. There's a daughter-in-law to handle them." Faria blushed, but laughter danced in her eyes. Small joys continued to weave new hopes around them. One afternoon, emboldened, Faria made tea herself. Lukman sipped it and praised, "What flavor!" even though it was a bit weak. Yet its imperfections vanished in the warmth of her effort. He thought, "True happiness accepts us with all our flaws." In the back courtyard, fresh rosebuds unfurled. Faria touched them gingerly, afraid to break their delicate petals. She had never imagined her life's dusty pages would one day reveal a chapter where hope's flowers would blossom. She believed she would remain tethered to her wheelchair forever, but now her feet moved. Pain still woke her at times, but her courage was stronger. Then came another happy turn. Riaz called to say he was nearly debt-free, had built up savings in Dubai, and now wished to expand the home or relocate to a better place. Lukman replied, "Beta, this house is a keepsake of your mother's memory. I am not ready to leave it." Riaz, eager to help, said, "Let's make some upgrades." An engineer arrived, drew up plans, and oversaw small structural changes. A few walls were altered, windows replaced, and the courtyard was tiled. Inside, the floors were renewed, and the whole house seemed to glow with fresh light. Neighbors marveled, "Wow, the place has been completely transformed." Lukman would only smile quietly and say, "As long as it makes life easier for my daughter-in-law, that's all the happiness I need." With each passing day, a deep serenity settled in his heart. The uneasy stirrings that once filled him with shame had vanished. Faria's place in his life was no less than a daughter's, yet there remained a tender warmth, like the affection elders sometimes feel for someone vulnerable in their care. He entrusted everything to God and stopped worrying about what others thought. One afternoon, Faria asked in surprise, Abuji, will you still look after me now that I'm almost well? He replied playfully, as long as I have breath in my lungs, I'll look after you. She laughed, and the roses of life seemed to bloom on her cheeks. Deep down, she felt grateful. Life had given her a priceless bond, even if its name was unconventional. Word spread through the neighborhood again, but this time in praise. Look at that old man, his heart's still young. He cared for his daughter-in-law as tenderly as any father would. This is what true family tradition means, standing by each other in hard times. A few remaining skeptics whispered their doubts, but their words had no effect, for everyone now saw the truth. It was this elderly father-in-law who had become the sole support for a disabled young woman. Soon Riaz took leave again and surprised them with a plan. A 2-week trip to Naran and Kagan in the mountains. Faria was thrilled at the thought of seeing snow-capped peaks and pristine beauty. At first, Lukman hesitated, worried that a long journey might strain her, but Riaz reassured him that the car was comfortable and he would take every precaution. Smiling, the three of them set off. Along the winding roads, Faria peeked out the window, then snapped pictures on her phone. Watching her radiant expressions, Lukman felt the purpose of his late-life courage. Here they were, cool mountain breezes whispering around them, and in their hearts a warm spring of love. They stayed at a small tourist lodge, where Faria tested her strength by walking unassisted for a few steps. Though she tired quickly, she never lost her resolve. That night, they strolled along the bank of the Kunhar River under a canopy of stars and shared old memories. Embarrassed, Riaz bowed his head and admitted, I made mistakes, especially in doubting you, Abuji. Lukman patted his shoulder. God forgives, Beta. Forgive yourself too. Their spirits felt light and free. Upon returning home, the neighbors were eager for tales of their adventure. Faria described her first ever mountain visit and how she savored tea brewed over an open fire. The children gasped, But you were disabled. How did you get there? She laughed. It was Allah's grace, and my family was with me. Life's vibrancy returned in full. Some mornings, Fariha would rise early to tidy up the courtyard while Lukman paced around after Fajr, prayer beads in hand. She'd take her walker and join him, and though they rarely spoke, their silent companionship said everything. One day she teased him. Abuji, you walk so fast. Slow down a little. I want to match my steps to yours. He chuckled and slowed his pace. I've been slowing down long ago, Beta. Sometimes memories of the past still pricked at them. Once, when Faria lay feverish in bed, Lukman touched her forehead. A flicker of old anxiety stirred within him. Why did his heart still race? But he reminded himself it was compassion and concern, the heart of someone who feels another's pain, not some forbidden desire. One afternoon, Aunt Nazreen stopped by with 2 other neighborhood women. Fariha Beta, they teased. Now that you're well, what are your plans? She replied earnestly, My plan is to repay Abuji's kindness all my life. The women laughed in surprise. Oh my, what a thing to say. Yet when Faria explained, had he not supported me step by step, I would still be incomplete. They looked at her with newfound respect. Evenings grew peaceful. Sometimes 2 or 3 neighborhood children would come play in the courtyard. Faria handed out toffees and biscuits while Lukman joined in their games, pushing toy cars or playing make-believe. Laughter blossomed and the courtyard came alive. A vine of jasmine climbed the nearby wall, its green tendrils swaying overhead. Faria would sit beneath it and think how, like the vine, people too need a support to bloom. Then came another joyful surprise, a call from Riaz. He was returning permanently to Pakistan. He'd saved enough in Dubai and planned to start a business here. Everyone rejoiced, hopeful that this family's stability would quiet any old rumors. When Riaz arrived, the house buzzed with celebration. He entered a partnership in a local firm and soon earned a comfortable income. He had more repairs done. An upstairs room was added and fresh furniture brought in. Lukman moved into the new, spacious room, while Faria and Riaz took the lower floor, close to the courtyard and trees. Although the house had grown, their hearts still beat together as one. One pleasant afternoon, Faria draped a light shawl over her shoulders, took her walker, and walked into the courtyard. There she found Lukman poring over an old photo album, pictures of his late wife in her youth, snapshots of Riaz as a boy, and proudly, a new photograph of Fariha smiling in her wheelchair. She bent over to look, tears glistening in her eyes. Was I really so weak that I used to sit in a wheelchair? In a gentle voice, Lukman said, Yes, you were in a wheelchair, but your inner strength was never weak. He turned the pages, showing her more photos. Here, he said, see your mother-in-law as a young woman. She was a strong lady, too. I see her spirit in you. Faria was silent for a moment, then said, Abuji, I never imagined this burdened life would ever bloom like a garden. He smiled, all thanks to Allah's mercy. And yes, people ought to help one another. As the sun set, birds returned to the trees. From outside came the familiar calls of street vendors. Faria remembered how once those sounds used to anger her. I'm stuck in bed while the world moves on. Now she understood that life never waits for anyone. We must walk with it ourselves. The next day, Faria invited some neighborhood girls over. They chatted and laughed, drank tea and gossiped. They noticed a new depth in her. Once, she had been cheerful, but now there was a serene maturity about her. One whispered to another, That old man's heart is truly big. Faria heard them and smiled inwardly, knowing they now praised what they once doubted. She grew worried, however, when she noticed her father-in-law wince occasionally, clutching his chest. She insisted on a doctor's visit. After an ECG, the doctor advised, At your age, you must be careful. Avoid strenuous activity. Fariha was deeply concerned. She resolved that she would no longer let Lukman do everything for her. She wanted to take care of him too, so he wouldn't tire himself out. Quietly, she began changing their routines, waking early to make tea in the kitchen, then sweeping the floors. When Lukman objected, Your back still hurts, Beta. She gently but firmly replied, No, Abuji, I'm perfectly fine. Thus began a new chapter. In a beautiful reversal of roles, Faria became Lukman's caretaker as well. Proof that genuine love and gratitude flow both ways. She reminded him to rest, fetched his medicine when it was time, and sometimes would even bring him a meal and set it outside his door. At first, Lukman felt a flush of embarrassment, but soon he recognized it as the natural give and take of life. He would think, I taught her to walk, and now she's teaching me to sit still. The neighbors began holding this home up as an example. This, they said, is what life looks like. A girl who was once disabled is now walking about and caring tenderly for her father-in-law. Once they had doubted, now they hailed that same devotion as a priceless, transparent bond. Truly, times had changed. One evening, the whole family sat together. When the power went out, they lit candles around an old lantern. In lighthearted humor, Riaz asked, Abuji, I sometimes wonder, what was it in you that brought Faria back to life? Lukman paused, then replied softly, Beta, there was no special gift, only a heart that feels another's pain. At his words, Faria drew a deep breath and bowed her head, thinking to herself that genuine compassion is humanity's greatest talent. As night deepened, none of them felt sleepy. A cool breeze drifted over the rooftop. Faria climbed up and lay on the bedding for a while, but memories washed over her. She asked her own heart, Will there come a time when I remain forever indebted to Abuji? Then she answered herself, In a relationship of love and service, there is no ledger of debt. At dawn, their daily routine resumed. Tea, breakfast, a little cleaning, then errands for one, medicine for another, duties for someone else. Life flowed seamlessly. No barrier remained. A few months later, the postman delivered another parcel. Inside was a letter from an old friend who had heard their story and was deeply moved. Along with prayers, he suggested that Lukman visit a school or community center to share how disability can be overcome. Reading it, Fariha exclaimed, Yes, Abuji, tell the world how to keep hope alive. Humble, he replied, Beta, I am but an incomplete man. You have made me whole. Hearing this, Faria blushed once more. If anyone ever rereads the pages of that old tale, they might draw this lesson. Sometimes we confine a relationship to its label, yet the true emotion behind it is far more boundless. Here, it was called father and daughter-in-law, but pure service and selfless love elevated it beyond society's traditional bounds. In the flow of time, no one remains sick forever, and no one is healthy always. Pain and comfort walk side by side. Even in Faria's life, pain returned, but more gently this time. One day she felt a twinge below her waist and lay down in her room. Lukman came in and asked, "What's wrong? You just lay down all of a sudden?" She quickly deflected. "No, Abuji, just fatigue, I'm fine." He advised her to see a doctor, but she insisted it was only ordinary tiredness. That evening at dinner, she appeared outwardly well, but Riaz sensed a quietness in her. When he asked, she brushed it aside. Early the next morning, he rose to find Abuji and Faria sitting in the courtyard, smiling at each other. It seemed she had found renewed courage. He whispered to himself, "Look, they truly are like father and daughter." His heart told him that everything was well, and his doubt melted away. One pleasant afternoon, with wisps of clouds drifting overhead, Faria strolled across the courtyard on her walker to sit with Lukman, and they talked for a long while. Summoning courage, she shared how at first she feared her disability would last forever, how she once felt the pity of an old man, yet eventually realized it was a selfless devotion without guile. Lukman confessed that he too had wrestled with inner conflict when he first grew to love her as more than a daughter-in-law. But divine guidance had steered him right. Speaking these truths lifted a burden from both their hearts. No shame remained, only honesty. That night, Faria prayed silently to God, "O Lord, you have not abandoned me in darkness. You guided Abuji and me both. You granted us this strong bond without casting us into temptation." After that night, the house seemed to glow with light. Even when Faria awakened with back pain, she refused to yield to it. Within the family, they openly supported one another. Riaz prepared her meals, Lukman fetched her medicines, and she persisted in her walking exercises. Soon she returned fully to her routine. Life now ran smoothly, like a river flowing confidently toward its destination. Faria began doing a little sewing, embroidering children's garments, and earned some modest income. Lukman would say, "Beta, don't worry about money, Allah will provide." She would reply, "I want to contribute too. How long can you all care for me?" Seeing her independence and confidence warmed his heart. He felt he could spend the rest of his days in peace. Bitter memories of the past seemed to melt away. Though he dearly missed his late wife, that ache no longer tormented him. Perhaps Allah had granted him patience alongside changing circumstances. One evening, sitting together in the courtyard, Lukman said to Faria, "I think this house needs a new name." She laughed and asked, "What, for example?" He answered, "House of Hope." She laughed in delight. What a wonderful name. The next day, he had a small wooden plaque made and engraved it with House of Hope, which he installed above the main gate. When neighbors read it, some smiled, some applauded, and some touched their ears in amazed recognition. Indeed, this home had become a greater symbol of hope than they ever imagined. Now, no negative gossip echoed here. Only prayers left its threshold. Riaz understood that the name embodied everything they had endured together. Months passed, and the story of these relationships became woven into their daily life. Sometimes, Faria would hum a tune in the kitchen. Other times, she'd sit in the courtyard and gently stroke Lukman's cheek, like a daughter showing her father affection. A few relatives even planned a visit home, delighted to see how positively she had changed. Some old-timers eyed the pair and hesitantly whispered, "You know, between your father-in-law and you..." But she deftly deflected their hints so that no one could draw any improper conclusions. A quiet peace reigned that no question could shatter. It seemed that this entire journey had purified them from within. In place of pain, sorrow, and despair bloomed a smile born of truth and love's power. In the darkness of narrow minds, a lamp had been kindled to show that the true measure of life lies not in others' gossip, but in our own intentions and actions. Allah granted Lukman peace in his final years. In retirement, he had earned a great reward, teaching a daughter like daughter-in-law to walk, to breathe freely, and to enjoy life again. Now, whenever he sat at dusk in the courtyard, he would gaze at the mango tree and reflect. It too once withered, but each spring it sprouts fresh buds. I may be old, but in my heart I have entered a new spring. Whether or not anyone understands, it no longer matters. He carried no nameless regret, no fear. He even allowed himself the occasional claim of illness. Faria, out of love, would chide him, "Take your medicine, don't eat so much sweet." And he would laugh it off. Riaz smiled at this harmony, grateful that his home now brimmed with peace and comfort. If anyone asks how this story ends, the answer is this: life goes on in its own way. Sometimes a simple accident teaches a profound lesson and reshapes a family's bonds. Fariha learned to stand on her own feet. Riaz grew into a responsible husband, and Lukman transformed his unnamed feelings into a pure act of service. Time moves forward, but it leaves behind these indelible footprints. When the sun dips below the horizon, a quiet festival awakens in the courtyard of the House of Hope. Birds trill among the branches, and Lukman, threading his prayer beads, casts a gentle eye on the neighborhood children at play and on Fariha, laughing as she waters the roses. Lost in his memories, he marvels at how strange life once was. Who could have imagined it unfolding this way? Yet perhaps this was God's plan, that their love and service would become an example. In his heart, he whispers, "Love is never wrong, so long as it carries the fragrance of sincerity and purity." If Faria were to glance back in that moment, she would see the elderly father whose every wrinkle holds the courage of the whole universe. Riaz, drawing close, murmurs, "This man taught me that even parents must be spared from misunderstanding." A soft laugh ripples between them, as though life's storms have at last subsided. Words can never fully capture the truth, but this tale lives not in a fairy tale realm but among us, where courage and genuine care heal every wound. A wheelchair, a few medicine boxes, some rumors, and a retired headmaster's broken heart, all combine to lay the foundation for a new life. That foundation may transcend traditional labels, but at its core lies a single reality. When suffering is met with healing, gratitude must follow. And when a relationship within moral bounds becomes another support, that is itself an act of worship. As darkness settles, the lights of the House of Hope glow warmly. Peeking through the kitchen window, Faria sees two pink blossoms swaying under the mango tree, their dewdrops dripping gently. She recalls how once she was like a withered branch, until a compassionate hand guided her back to life. Now she blooms, green within, her feet carrying her forward, her spirit alive with purpose. Drawing a deep breath, she steps inside at Lukman's call. "Come, my daughter, tea is ready. Let us drink together." She smiles, nods, and crosses the threshold. Outside, dew continues to fall from the leaves, and in the hush there is a secret only those two healing souls can hear. Souls that became balm for one another. This, then, is the heart of their story: selfless love, pure service, and a sanctuary of noble emotions that time cannot erase. Everything else may fade, but the fragrance of such love endures forever.